Welcome to Weather Extra, everyone. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Jillian Johnson. Today, Sunday, September 1st, marks the start to meteorological fall. The astronomical start to fall will take place in 3 weeks. Now, as far as the forecast goes for the upcoming fall season, we'll bring in First Alert Meteorologist Sean Bellafury, who kicks off Weather Extra for us this week. Sean.
Summer is finally coming to a close. Cooler weather is on the horizon and potentially more rain on the horizon too as we enter into fall. Now, officially, fall doesn't actually begin until September 22nd at 7:43 in the morning. That is the exact time that the center of the sun's rays pass over the equator on their trek down to the Tropic of Capricorn. That is, of course, the beginning of winter when that happens. But we say it's fall starting September 1st because it's based on the temperature cycle instead of astronomical fall, which is based on how things are going in space. The tilt of the Earth, depending on how it's tilted towards or away from the sun, that changes every single year. So meteorological fall does definitely help keeping the record books a little bit clean. And this is what fall typically looks like for us. The average temperature, that's high and low together, 68.1 degrees. The warmest we've ever seen was 1931 with an average temperature of 74.2. Coldest is 1976 with an average temperature of 62.8 degrees. And we typically average just a shade under 10 inches of rain from September to November. The wettest was 2015, 21.95 inches of rain. So what is this fall going to look like? Well, you probably know the answer. Not only here in Central Texas, but a good chunk of the United States is expected to see a good chance of above normal temperatures. We may not start to get some of those really cool temperatures until the latter half of fall. And as far as the precipitation outlook goes, we are expecting a pretty good chance, especially in the desert Southwest and the southern plains, of a below normal amount of precipitation. But it's only going to take about 5 inches of rain to get us to a yearly rainfall average. Tropics, of course, still very active, especially in the month of September. But notice in the Gulf of Mexico, as we move into November, that we typically start to see less and less tropical storm activity. Reporting in the studio, Sean Bellafury, KWTX News 10.
Tomorrow is Labor Day, which marks the unofficial end to summer. And as far as the forecast goes, this could be one of the coolest Labor Days we've seen in more than a decade. For the Labor Day holiday, we should on average have a high of 90 degrees and a low of 70, but it can be much hotter and even colder than that. In fact, the hottest temperature recorded on a Labor Day was 111 degrees, which happened back in the year 2000. Now, the coldest temperature recorded was 59, which occurred back in 1982. While we have rain in the forecast for Labor Day this year, we're not forecasting to break the record wettest Labor Day in history. Back in 1906, 3.65 inches of rain fell at the Waco Regional Airport. Now let's take a look back at the past 3 Labor Day holidays here in Central Texas. Back in 2021, Labor Day fell on the 6th of September, and we had a high of 95 degrees and a morning low of 75. The following year, Labor Day fell on the 5th. While the holiday started off cooler with a low of 65, the afternoon high remained the same. Last year, Labor Day fell on the 4th, and it was a toasty holiday. The official high at the Waco Regional Airport was 100 degrees with a warm morning low of 78. The past 3 years, we have not seen any measurable rainfall at Waco Regional, but you may be wondering when was the last time we had rainfall on a Labor Day Monday. You have to go back 8 years to 2018 to find the last time we had rain on Labor Day. Nearly half an inch of rain fell at the Waco Regional Airport. This year could also be one of the coolest Labor Days in Central Texas in more than a decade. The last time we had a holiday where high temperatures were only in the 80s was back in 2011. We'll see if we will do it again this year. One of the major weather stories across parts of the United States last week was the extreme heat. Throughout last week, at least 55 million Americans were under advisories for high temperatures or extreme heat, with over a dozen cities shattering high heat records. The hot and especially humid weather extended through the Midwest and over to the East Coast last week. Feels like temperatures in some of those areas exceeded 110 degrees, which is very unusual, even during the summer months. Some schools had to be let out early in Pittsburgh and some Chicago suburbs due to uncomfortably hot temperatures in the classroom. In the rural Midwest, the humidity was made worse by a phenomenon called corn sweat that happens when corn plants and other crops release water into the atmosphere on hot days. And yes, you just heard me right, corn sweat. For more on what corn sweat is and how it made last week's heat wave even worse in the Midwest, here's Armand Rahman with more.
I'm trying my best to keep these guys dry because apparently when corn sweats, it makes us sweat. That's right. Corn sweat is actually making this week's heat wave worse for us.
What corn sweat is the massive amount of water that's given off by corn and other plants, soybeans, and other green vegetation.
1 acre of corn gives off about 3,000 gallons of water into the atmosphere. No, the corn doesn't actually sweat like humans do.
It's called evapotranspiration, but I kind of like corn sweat better.
But it has left some pretty noticeable pit stains on the t-shirt that is America. Dew points, or the measure of moisture in the atmosphere, has shown up highest and darkest this week in the southern coast and in the corn belt of the Midwest.
Dew points in the upper 70s and in a few local instances the lower 80s. That's about as high as a dew point value can get. We can build humidity levels that mirror that of the deep jungles locally here in the upper Midwest, all because of the corn.
But when high dew points and temps mix so well, it creates a jungle of high energy in the atmosphere, ripe for some beastly storms.
That term derecho, that's a long track wind event. Derechos really thrive on that moisture-rich environment.
So maybe this explains why working in or near a cornfield in the dog days of summer feels more like a sauna.
Growing up on the farm, I had no inclination that something as simple behind me in the cornfield, all this water giving off, is moisture for thunderstorms, moisture to make an incredibly uncomfortable environment.
While the corn's making things hot right now, don't sweat it, because all the moisture it releases helps produce storms, and that in turn can help cool us down for a little bit. Reporting in Madison, Armand Rahman, News 3 Now.
That increase in humidity across the Midwest did lead to numerous rounds of severe weather last week. Here's a view of a supercell moving through the Chicago area Tuesday evening. Wind gusts of 50 to 60 miles per hour were recorded across the city. There's also a line of severe storms that swept through Michigan and the Great Lakes region. Hurricane-force wind gusts and tennis ball hail wreaked havoc on many neighborhoods. More than 100 reports of damage were issued as a result of the storms from the Midwest to across the Great Lakes states. Brutal stretches of heat are the normal across the desert Southwest this time of the year, but although the extreme heat may be more common, it doesn't mean that it's any less deadly. The city of Phoenix has opened up 95 cooling centers across the city in hopes to lower the amount of heat-related deaths this year. Alexis Dominguez has more on the efforts being done by the city to keep its residents safe.
And I'm encouraged this week that our numbers for 2024 are behind where we were in 2023.
Last year, 645 deaths were linked to the heat, beating the previous record set in 2022 by 52%. Right now, Maricopa County is reporting fewer people have died from the heat this year compared to last. It's a difference of about 40 people.
I'm hoping this really signals that we are turning the trend and starting to see a decline in those heat-related deaths.
Each year, the county releases its annual report on heat-related deaths. That data is then used to find which communities need targeted resources.
We opened all of our heat sites sort of based on last year's data where we had the most heat calls.
This year, the city of Phoenix opened up more than 95 cooling centers, along with hydration stations.
To date, right now, we've had more than 26,000 people have visited our centers.
According to the state, the Burton Barr Central Library, the city's only 24-hour respite center, has been the most visited site.
We've helped over 540 individuals from that site alone be connected to shelter, treatment, detox, and other services. 89% of the folks that are served at that site indicate that they are experiencing homelessness.
It's those efforts that's now gaining the attention from other states and cities.
The program that the city of Phoenix has built is being looked at as a national model. It's one of the first cities to implement comprehensive programs.
With heat claiming fewer lives this year compared to last, the Phoenix's Office of Emergency Management plans to continue building on its heat mitigation efforts, adding more resources every year.
We'll learn from those numbers as we did last year, and we'll look to see what we can do to enhance our strategy for next year to make those numbers even lower.
Across the nation, heat-related deaths have been steadily increasing for years as well. A new study in the medical journal JAMA shows a 117% spike from 1999 to 2023. More than 21,000 people died during that period, with a disproportionate number of deaths recorded in California, Arizona, Nevada, and Texas. Using data from the CDC, researchers found the annual number of deaths varied from year to year before 2016. But since 2016, deaths have increased by nearly 17% each year. According to the World Meteorological Organization, extreme heat is the #1 weather-related killer here in the U.S. All right, up next on Weather Extra, we bring you the latest news from outer space. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Weather Extra. Since early June, we've been following NASA's Starliner mission closely. Two astronauts, Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore, were supposed to spend 8 days in space, but now NASA says they'll be there until February, forced to wait for a SpaceX craft after the Boeing Starliner had a series of problems. CBS's Mark Strassman has been following their journey and has more on this now extended mission.
NASA has decided that Butch and Suni will return with Crew 9 next February.
NASA's decision switched spaceships and space companies mid-mission.
Ignition.
Back in June, astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams flew to the International Space Station on Boeing Starliner. But now they'll fly home next February in a SpaceX Crew Dragon. Despite Boeing's insistence, Starliner is safe to fly them back.
You know, it's disappointing that they're not coming home on Starliner, but that's okay. It's a test flight.
NASA spent weeks analyzing issues Starliner developed on its flight to the ISS, specifically helium leaks and the overheating of small maneuvering thrusters. That propulsion system's critical to the return flight home, including undocking and the braking burn on the return to Earth. The small engines need to fire hundreds of times to keep the spacecraft in the precise orientation for safe re-entry and on-target touchdown. Instead, Starliner will return uncrewed next month.
There was just too much uncertainty in the prediction of the thrusters. It was just too much risk with the crew.
In a statement, Boeing said, "We continue to focus first and foremost on the safety of the crew and spacecraft. We are executing the mission as determined by NASA." But NASA's decision is bound to frustrate the legacy aerospace giant in what the space agency admitted was a dramatic change.
So how now do you begin to rebuild that relationship of trust with Boeing?
Well, I don't think we're rebuilding trust. I think we're looking at the data, and we view the data and the uncertainty that's there differently than Boeing does.
What is certain, Wilmore and Williams will spend another 6 months at the ISS. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Houston.
Well, Mark Strassman has also been following the journey of 4 civilian astronauts that'll participate in a historic 6-day mission called Polaris Dawn. The 4-man crew will climb to a record orbit 870 miles above Earth. That's more than 3 times higher than the International Space Station. The mission will also attempt the first ever commercial spacewalk. Mark met with the crew and has more on the training that's needed for this historic mission.
SpaceX, we are go for fuel pressurization.
In the crew training room at SpaceX headquarters, Michael Blasco and his team play Gremlin. Their job, make life tough for 4 civilian astronauts.
1, low pressure, abort, abort, abort.
You're throwing problems at them.
Exactly.
Emergencies.
Yeah. Yes. Our favorite part of the job is just stress people out and see how they respond.
Leading this crew, Jared Isaacman, a 41-year-old billionaire entrepreneur. In 2021, he paid for and commanded Inspiration 4, the first all-civilian mission to orbit the Earth. He hopes this mission, Polaris Dawn, will kickstart development of new tools for even deeper space exploration.
I didn't grow up in time to see humans walk on the moon. I really would like my daughters to, see humans walking on Mars someday.
Isaacman's 3 crewmates include retired fighter pilot Scott Poteet and 2 SpaceX employees, Anna Menon and Sarah Gillis.
SpaceX's go for spacewalk operations.
The mission highlight and engineering challenge, the first commercial spacewalk. Roughly 435 miles above Earth, their Dragon capsule will vent down to the vacuum of space. 2 of the astronauts, Isaacman and Gillis, will alternate floating through the open hatch for roughly 15 minutes apiece.
What's it like training for something that
essentially has never been done before.
A huge part of the last couple years is not only developing the hardware that we need, but also developing the training for how do we go and successfully demonstrate we can do this.
EV1 is transitioning for egress.
This special crane simulates microgravity. We watch the astronauts practice exiting the hatch and testing their mobility.
Hopefully SpaceX is going to continue this.
To make this spacewalk a reality, these spacesuits were redesigned from helmet to toe. They also have to withstand thermal extremes in the vacuum of space.
Oh, it has to have all the means to sustain life. When it's pressurized up, what you're seeing there is a mini spaceship.
Space flight is inherently risky, but this crew is confident in their training and in the company about to make space history.
It's been an absolute amazing journey training for this mission, and we just can't wait to go to space.
For a mission that could open the door to new possibilities in space. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Hawthorne, California.
The original plan was to have the SpaceX Polaris Dawn mission launch this past Tuesday morning, but on Monday night, SpaceX scrubbed that planned launch due to an issue with a ground-based system that loads propellant onto the rocket. SpaceX was going to try again that following morning, but the mission was put on hold once again. This time, the second delay was due to weather conditions, and the same unfavorable weather conditions were expected into Thursday as well. Now, SpaceX is continuing to monitor weather conditions and may try to give the mission a go over the holiday weekend. We'll bring you an update on the Polaris Dawn mission and next week's Weather Extra. Well, up next on Weather Extra is this week's episode of Degrees of Science. Brady Taylor had the opportunity to speak with a veteran storm chaser that made a documentary showing viewers a first-hand look at what storm chasing is really like with stunning 4K video of the storms. We'll have more on this documentary right after this.
Today we're talking to Martin Licious. He created the documentary Chasers of Tornado Alley, Touching the Sky. What made you want to put together this documentary?
Well, I wanted people to see what storm chasing is really like. You don't really get to see that at all in the movies, on TV, or even YouTube. You know, a lot of the storm chasers there, you see them tracking a tornado, or maybe they're inside of a tornado. And it is very exciting, but that's not, you don't really get to see what storm chasing is really like. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to basically take the viewers on a storm chase with me, and so they could see what it was like.
Do you have a kind of a target audience that you're trying to get to with this documentary?
Yeah, I think a couple audiences. First of all, of course, regular storm chasers I think would enjoy it just because it's something that they have a passion about. But I think it's mostly for people that don't really know much about storm chasing and to give them a different perspective than they normally see.
Is there one or two that just really stick out as some of the wildest chases that you've been out on?
Every once in a while, Mother Nature will give you something that's pretty amazing. I think certainly in May of 2004, we intercepted a storm near Harper, Kansas. And that's actually in the documentary. It was a cyclic tornadic supercell. So what that means is that it cycles. You'll have one tornado that starts to weaken while another one develops and so on. It keeps doing that over and over and over again. In that particular storm, we saw quite a few tornadoes. I think I saw 2 tornadoes on the ground 3 times, and I saw 3 tornadoes on the ground once or twice, which is pretty amazing.
Let folks know where exactly they can find this documentary.
Well, the documentary, the best place to go is to realstormchasers.com. And you can read the synopsis, watch the trailer, and then see where it's being shown right now.
To hear more about this storm chasing documentary, scan the QR code on your screen to watch on YouTube, or you can head over to our website at KWTX.com/degrees of science. Weather Extra will be right back. Welcome back to Weather Extra. When fighting wildfires, weather conditions can either help or complicate the efforts in putting out those flames. But scientists that work for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in Boulder, Colorado, are working on a new way to get the ever-changing weather information to first responders in real time. Ethan Carlson has a look at their new tool.
On a cloudy day north of Boulder, last-minute equipment checks, preparing the landing area, and a quick scan of the skies to make sure no other aircraft are near.
This guy is doing very low maneuvers.
All in the pursuit of important information.
Pressure, temperature, wind speed, wind direction, and relative humidity. So as it goes up, it's taking data the whole way.
This new drone, operated by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, is getting a test flight. Next time there's a big wildfire, atmospheric research scientist Janet Intreri and her team may be out there, using this versatile machine suited perfectly for Colorado.
The mountains make airflow very complex and it creates its own weather. A fire adds another level of complexity because it will also affect the weather. Being able to take the drone and drive to locations where you wouldn't normally have information is really a key part of this.
Getting accurate information near wildfires is perhaps more crucial than ever. Wildfires are here to stay, and NOAA wants to be prepared.
We need to know what is going to happen in this moment, 6 hours from now, a day from now, a week, a month, a year, in order to be able to see what the most likely outcomes are of wildfires.
Especially as the climate continues to warm.
We're projected to have more extreme events, and as a result of that, we need to have better forecasts in order to be able to foresee them.
The data doesn't just help with long-term forecasts, it can help the people who are actively helping to fight the fires.
If you have that kind of information in near real time, you can respond to the people who need it the most, the fire crew teams.
The plan is to keep testing the drone for the remainder of the year, and to work with NOAA meteorologists on what information and techniques will be most beneficial moving forward. And if another wildfire were to pop up,
we're ready to go, and we would hope to learn how to respond as quickly as possible, but I think we have all of our pieces in place.
That's all we have for you on this week's episode of Weather Extra. Make sure to download the free KWTX weather app to stay up to date with the forecast, as rain could impact some of your outdoor holiday plans. Have a wonderful Labor Day and a great first week of September. We'll see you again next weekend.